So there we go, recording in progress. All right. Well, once again, welcome to this Connections Forum that's connected to our productions of Heroes of the Fourth Turning, which I cheekily named "We Can Be Heroes," which is also it is a quote from the play, not just a pop reference. But I'm very grateful to have joining me in this conversation tonight, Dorothy Fortenberry, who those of you who are consistent patrons of the warehouse are probably should be familiar with Dorothy. She is a playwright and a screenwriter and an essayist and one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant thinkers on faith and the intersection of faith and politics and all the pressing concerns of our, I think, particularly of our climate in the latter days of capitalism. Anyway, so I'm grateful to have her here to talk with us about this show because I think, when we Mike first saw this show in 2018, I think, at Playwrights Horizons in New York. Um, he was immediately taken with it, and not only the experience of seeing it, but as a producer, was just sort of caught with the idea that this play is going to mean something very specific in New York and mean something kind of different to an audience in Greenville. And I think that's one of the things that, as we've had a couple of weeks of the run now, we've started to realize that it was very much a true insight. I think there is a difference between having a primarily left-leaning audience sit and watch something and like have it feel almost like cultural appropriation versus having a more mixed bag of an audience. I think it's not that Warehouse doesn't have, we certainly have plenty of left-leaning people that come to see our shows, but we're embedded in a place that if you aren't these people that are featured on stage during the show, you certainly recognize them in a way that I'm not sure that every New Yorker does. Um, and I think Dorothy's an interesting person to like invite into the conversation because she is a Catholic. She's has been bi-coastal, has lived in grew up in D.C., right?
Mhm.
And but then has lived in California for a while now. Um, and so she has a little bit of a sense of like how geography kind of impacts some of these conversations as well. So anyway, I'm super grateful to have her be a part of this conversation. Just one like small little introduction to me because I don't know if y'all know this as well, but you're sort of maybe it could be useful context, which is that in addition to being the director of education here and a director of plays, and a lot of y'all have seen a lot of my work over the past like 6 or 7 years, but you might not know that I have a seminary degree, and I think that was part of the reason that Mike sort of like threw this play on my desk how many ever years ago and was like, I don't know when we're doing this, but just be ready. um, and so these are also issues that are like kind of near and dear to my heart. And we'll get into that a little bit later on, I think. But eh, for now, I'd like to maybe just like pass the baton to Dorothy, and instead of just me introducing her, I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. I love talking about stuff, so I'm always happy when someone asks me to talk about stuff. And yeah, I mean, this play, I read it, when it was in New York, because everybody in my sort of universe couldn't stop talking about it. And then I saw the production at Rogue Machine out here in LA, when it was done here. And yeah, I think there is a certain way that it can seem sort of like anthropological,
Hmm.
to a certain kind of audience. Like it's like going to the zoo. It's like, oh, what's this? Like I've never seen this kind of animal before. That's interesting. Versus some sense of like, oh yeah, I've heard these conversations. And I also think, you know, in sort of a heartbreaking way now, at this point in time, the the play feels like it's on a bit of a cusp, and it's like so many, we've gone through, right? Like so many
Hmm.
thresholds have been reached since this moment. So there's oddly, I think by 2026, you get an almost nostalgia for like, oh, sweet babies, like you don't even know.
You don't
You
even know what's
know,
coming.
you don't even know.
Yeah,
But
they're holding out for Pence
yeah, I
in this
know.
play. Yeah.
Sweeties, sweeties. But yeah, I think what does religion ask of us? Does it ask anything?
Mhm.
Is a big theme in it. And I think that's not I think when we see portrayals of Christians, in popular culture and media, it's often people who are asking something of someone else. So
Mhm.
it's like, hey, I'm a Christian and I'm going to tell you what you can and can't do. But
Mhm.
watching people feel deeply who are going, no, I feel like I've actually been asked what I can and can't do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anyway, I think that's sort of what the play is about to me. Yeah, as Jay said, I'm a playwright, I'm a TV writer. Um, I like, when people get in rooms and don't agree with each other, which is sort of the fundamental theatrical form.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, and this is one where there's a lot of that. This is a play where
totally.
there's a lot of that, a lot of disagreement, and I think that is one of the uh, I think fascinating things about it. Maybe from the anthropological perspective, I suppose, right? Is like we have this. I think especially those of us who kind of live on the left, kind of have had this sense that the right is monolith, like, and it's not. There's a lot of disagreement on both sides, just like we have it on our side too. So anyway, yeah, I think I love that question of like, what does religion ask of you? I was reading an article earlier this week. I can't remember the source. I'd have to go back and find it, but it was talking about the sort of the spiritual, not religious movement, and how like there's kind of a waning in that sort
Mm,
of, which is people are starting to realize there's a little bit of a realization that like there's 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 a little bit of a cheapness to that, for perhaps, that like that just like going down a buffet of spirituality doesn't, that is like devoid of any sort of like ethical or moral code, or any sacrifice, which is something that comes up a lot in this play, is like just another form of consumerism and not necessarily something that changes you in any way, which is what spirituality should do. So I think that that's an interesting thing to bring into this conversation, because that is there. No one in this, no character in this play could be accused of like not having their convictions change them in some way.
totally, totally. And I think we all people are longing for both restrictions and release, right? Like
Mhm.
we yearn deeply as humans for both of those things. And I think if we don't get them in religion, then we find them somewhere else, right? So it's like, oh, I'm on, a keto eating plan. It's like, okay, or you could just like fast, like
Right.
it's like
Something
like
we've been talking about for ages,
yeah,
right?
but like you want someone to tell you, like, here is the time when you can and can't eat things because it's actually unsettling to be able to eat anything at any time of day or night. And so it's like valuable to have someone be like, nope, this food is for here, and then no food, and then yes, food, but then in this way, not the food. And if you have a religious framework for it, you're like, okay, cool. This is when I eat and when I don't eat, and these are the things I eat and don't eat. But if you don't, I feel like all around you, you're like, oh, well, people are recreating that. People are recreating limitations, but then cheat days and like,
Right. Yeah,
like
totally.
celebration, and it's like that toggle of restriction and release. You're just sort of assembling it out of whatever you have on hand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting insight. Well, let's bring it back to the play just a little bit, and then we'll I've
Sure.
got sort of like some questions, and we can kind of bounce these back and forth, I
Yeah.
guess. But I mean, the first thing that was sort of that feels like the obvious question is to talk about kind of like the the religious right, and I think that's especially present in the South, right? About that they get a lot of airtime, right? And I don't know about you, but I've always felt that's a little bit strange, because like Christianity is like pretty radical politically if you just particularly if you like look at the life of Jesus.
Yeah,
um
completely.
and I know that there's like sociological and sort of like Gina talks about it in the play, like forming a voting bloc, right? There are historical and sociological reasons that emerged. But I'm wondering, like, what ways do you work to sort of like actively counter that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, so much of it is just like showing up and just being myself in public.
Yeah.
I think I'm a very gentle evangelist. Like I don't, come and tell anybody what to do, but I will just bring up if I am in a space of like, just as it comes up, like, oh, I was at church, or like, here's a thing that, that was happening in my religious life. And there's curiosity and sort of surprise. And then I feel like it's just kind of me living my life. And then having, the politics that I have and having the conversations about the politics that I have. Um, you know, it's just kind of like I feel like I just kind of do it. It is, you know, it, I hate to say anything nice about the internet, but um, I do feel like one of the gifts that like sort of early social media had for me was I ended up meeting a bunch of people in that way that you kind of could on like early Twitter who had written books or articles or things who were not very conservative but were very religious, and you could just like become friends with them
Yeah.
because there are not a lot of like, right, like it's not like a huge movement, so you're not going to get lost in it. And people could give each other tips, could be like, oh, I'm going to such and such city, like
Mhm.
what church do you think, would be a church I could go to while I'm in that city that would like have a homily that like wouldn't make me tear my hair out, or like
Right.
you know is there, what is a book for, if I'm doing Bible study with like a, elementary school student, right? Like, what is a version of that? Do you have a resource? Do you have a textbook? Do you have it like, and you could just have those conversations. And I don't know how those would have been formed without, the internet. It would have been harder.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so I think a lot of it is just kind of I've been, I don't know, out. That seems stupid, right? Like to say that I'm out, but I've been sort of openly and honestly myself. Um, and then people do talk to you, like
Yeah.
I've had people like come up to me and been like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like I started going to like an Episcopal church. I don't know, like just like shh, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Don't tell anybody.
like
Yeah,
they
it's great.
feel like you're an ally. Or, they'll text me after they have a kid and be like, I suddenly feel like I need to get my kid baptized. Like, I didn't
Mhm.
think I cared, but now I have a kid and I care. Like, where can I get my
Mhm.
kid baptized? Like, so I feel like being sort of publicly myself has meant that like if I know somebody who's going through something, like I can also be a resource to them the same way people were resources to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think, for me it was it was I think my reconstruction after my deconstruction as an evangelical, and the son of a Southern Baptist minister, right, was like very tied to both resources and communities that I found online, right?
Yeah.
And so yes, as much as the internet can be a dangerous place, it also, I mean, this was the promise of it, right, I guess.
Yeah.
So it has done it in some ways. I do think that's interesting what you're talking about, like the idea of coming out around this is interesting framing. I think for me, as a person who has also lived in like a variety of places, I think it's been so I went to seminary in Seattle, which is like a famously secular place.
Yeah.
And I think what the irony of that is that I have actually in some ways found it more I have found it trickier to talk about my faith here in Greenville
Hmm.
than
That's
I
interesting.
did there. Because I think here it comes with assumptions if you say that you are Christian,
Hmm.
in a way that like it opens up conversations when you say it in a place like Seattle, you know,
Yeah,
like
totally.
and I don't and that's like something I'm still working through. Like what how do I navigate that, you know?
Totally. And I do think there are, there's so many different pockets and places and sort of specific local cultures, all over the country. And it is amazing. Like there are places that I could move and I feel like, yeah, I would have to sort of figure out, who I was and how I fit in. I mean, when I was in grad school, I didn't live near the drama school. And so I didn't go to church on campus and the sort of campus church. I went to just my local parish. And
Mhm.
that was also a really interesting way of like getting to know people in the town, getting to know locals. And I don't remember anything particularly political at that church, but in some ways, the absence of a politic, like in a Catholic
Is
church,
a
to be,
politic?
yeah, like I was like, we're not like that. What went unsaid, if every week it was just like help poor people, love your neighbor, that's its own, decision, and just participating, choosing to volunteer, and then getting voluntold. Um, once they found out I was in the drama school, they were like, "Oh, you're directing the Easter play," and I was like, "I don't want to direct the Easter play." And they're like, "Cool, so rehearsals on Friday. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
here's the schedule. This is the script. Like, we don't care what you want." Um, and just, that was another set of people who I don't know who they voted for in 2008. Like, that's
Right.
when I was living there. We didn't talk about it, but it was a place where I saw, my next door neighbors. I saw people from around the block, and it really gave me a sense of who I was living with, and not just students. And it was really valuable.
Yeah, which is a political act in and of itself, right? Yeah, and for just to do a quick sort of public service announcement for the next event that we're having connected to this show. We did a book club on this book, Don't Talk About Politics, and I would say that is sort of a thesis there, which is that like you know we the just the that the organ I think spoiler alert, part of what she is saying is that organizing has gotten too easy and it's made it not particularly effective at changing people's behavior or their minds about things. Like what actually happens is is that minds get changed in relationship and community, and particularly community that has to like be in the trenches together.
Completely. Like one of the church that I went to, one of the churches I went to in LA, I started going to it because I heard, a guy in my office on a TV show. He was like, "Oh, I was at church." And like I had never mentioned, it was my first job. I was like, "Don't talk about
Mhm.
church." And then he went and I was like, "Where'd you go to church?" And he named the church and I was like, "Okay, well, what I know about you is that you're a gay black man, and if you feel comfortable in this church, with your
Right.
husband, like that lets me know that I think I'm gonna be okay, and that was a church where I don't know that the, priest there came in with any set of beliefs, but he just this was a parishioner and he welcomed him. And then when, he and his husband were like, we're going to try to adopt, he was like, well, we should obviously pray for you, that your adoption is successful because like we want kids to be adopted. So like it was relationship, right? Like it wasn't
Yeah,
sort of an ideal, like an ideological concept of his view about an issue. It was meeting an individual, being like, this is a faithful, good man, let's help him build a beautiful family. Why
that's
wouldn't you
right.
do that?
Yeah, which feels like a nice segue to like the next thing that I was sort of interested in hearing from you on. Because so Gina, the professor in the play, sort of makes this claim, which I think is I hear you hear quite a bit, right? And this is both from a Protestant and a Catholic perspective, I think, is she says that we're called to be single issue voters, right? And that issue is life. Um, And I'm just curious, as a Catholic, how you hear that claim and what you do with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I think about that quote, what I think about actually is this email that was in the Epstein files, actually, that was Jeff Epstein complaining about Bill Gates. And he was saying, Bill Gates came to me and he was like, I want $1 billion or $1 million because you could save 1 million lives. This is what's wrong with Catholicism. And
Mhm.
it was like this very clear statement that like Catholics believe that all of those million people deserve to be alive. Like what a stupid religion. This is why I'm not giving him any money. This is what a stupid pitch for like, vaccines and like clean
Mhm.
water.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I feel like, okay, so if you're a single issue voter and your issue is life, like you got to mean it like life, like people in every country, people who are dying from lack of, nutrition and water, climate disruption, I, I feel like the idea that every life has value and dignity because it's given from God is a deeply radical idea, but it
Mhm.
has so many more political ramifications than just reproduction policy, right?
Mhm.
Like you're like, okay, so wait, all billion people are like equally valuable. Like none of them are more valuable than others. Everybody is valuable. Wow, what would you do to build a world that looked like this? So I think for me, where I get to on it, in my own life, is I'm like, what are we doing that actually values people actually being alive?
Mhm.
And this came up, in a real personal way. I I was pregnant with my first kid before Obamacare passed, and pregnancy was considered a pre-existing condition. And my husband's job situation changed, so we lost health insurance. So I was calling health insurance companies, being like, "Look, can I just get on as a private individual? I'm pregnant." And I got told by someone, "Well, we can't cover the pregnancy because it's a pre-existing condition, but you could go get an abortion and then come back and then reapply." And I was like, I know 1 billion% that the exact politicians, like almost to a person, who are in favor of life are also supporting, you know, being against the legislation that would make you have to take me on, right? So I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah.
it was an extremely clarifying moment of like, okay, so if you're, you know, organizing and, trying to get people all riled up against Obamacare, and yet the result of it is that like a pregnant lady is being explicitly told by an insurance company, you know,
Go get an
go
abortion.
get an abortion of, a wanted healthy child that you have, actively sought to have in this life because we will not cover your pregnancy. To me, it was just this sort of radicalizing moment of, I was like, okay, well, so this is where your commitment to life gets you. Like,
Mhm.
and I don't, you can't draw, circles around who gets to live. Like it is a radical commitment. Nobody can fully fulfill it, but I guess for me, I just think so much about like you can't be in favor of life and be in favor of eliminating all, aid to the developing world. You can't like you can't like so I guess I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say I agree with Gina because I don't think I have Gina's politics, but I also think that the idea that life is code for just a set of, beliefs around abortion is just super limiting, and
Yeah.
it's actually should be as expansive as possible. And Catholic Church full of flaws, but at its best, in a way that, in a good way, annoyed Jeff Epstein, right? Like if Jeff Epstein's complaining about you, you're doing your job right.
Yeah.
Like
That's right.
is articulating something about how everybody, yeah, exactly, all of these billions of people have a right to be here on this planet.
Yeah. And so that sort of that feels like it butts up against another question I had, which is like, okay, so you're resisting um, in a way that I think is super useful and in a way that I aspire to as well, right? Which is like resisting having your politics, your politics forced into a faith container that is defined by like a that's defined by one wedge issue that people have decided they can construct a voting block around, right? So then how are you what are the parameters then of how you think about having marrying your faith and your political conviction?
Yeah.
Does one precede the other? Does one super, is it, or does your faith inform your politics? Do your politics inform your faith? Do you hold them separately? What, I'm just curious the trajectory you go on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it sort of gets back to that idea of like what I ask of others and what I ask of myself. So I feel like my politics are a sense of, what is the relationship between myself and other people that I'm trying to make for a better society, but that also is going to encompass a bunch of people that I super disagree with
Yeah.
and who are going to do a bunch of things that I think are sinful, that I also think should be legal, right? Like I do not
Yeah.
think everything that I think is sinful should be illegal. I think that would be a crazy town. But like I like but
That's a theocracy, right?
you
Like
know,
that's right.
so it's like my relationship to politics
As
is
she says, as she has the Handmaid's Tale poster behind her.
ta-da, right? So my relationship to politics is like we're gonna have to have some space for disagreement and back and forth, and whatever team I'm on isn't gonna win all the time, and so it's about building a system where it's as fair as possible. We have as many shared beliefs and values as possible so that as much middle ground can be created so that it's like, okay, when I lose something, it's not the end of the world and I'm not, executed. It's just like, oh, you lost. Okay, well, better luck next
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
and that it can kind of, I feel like toggle, right? And my concern in politics and my sort of number one way of understanding the things I'm most worried about are things that are spirals instead of toggles.
Mhm.
So I feel like climate is a spiral, right? Like the
Yeah.
more sea ice you lose, the less reflective the surface of the earth gets, the more hot everything gets. So like the more climate changes, the more climate changes. That's why it's dangerous. And I think, anti-democracy is a circle, right? Like the
Yeah.
more authoritarian you get, the fewer, press and, voting and all those things, like that becomes bad because, you don't have the checks on the anti-democracy. I think there are other issues where I'm like, you can go kind of far in this direction, and then maybe people are grumpy about it, and then they kind of want to go over here, and then like, oh, that's kind of extreme. We didn't really want that. We wanted some, and like you just are sort of toggling, and there's costs, right? Like
Right.
it's not free, but the nature of the conversation is you're sort of slaloming back and forth, and
Mhm.
it's not something that is inexorably always moving. It's something where if you go too far, there's a mechanism by which people can go, oh, well, it seemed cool, but now that I see it in practice, it seems barbaric. Let's not. And you're like, well, you said it was going to be like that, but okay, like, great, great. You changed your mind. Great. So we'll do it a different way. And then if that gets, annoying to you in another way, then maybe. So that's sort of how I try to think about politics is like most of my energy should go into stopping avalanches and cycles and things that feed on
Yeah.
themselves.
Spiraling issues.
Spiraling things that are toggles, I can sort of go like, I have my opinion on
Mhm.
where we'll be, but I also do generally have kind of a faith in the American public that like we'll land somewhere because we do
Yeah.
tend to want to tolerate each other. Um, and then for faith, I was like, what faith asks of me is so much. It's so much more. And it's about, what I do personally, and it's about, the obligations that I have to my family, to my community, to myself. And there are restrictions that I put on myself because of my faith that I would never tell somebody else that they should, I'm not going to go knock a hamburger out of somebody else's hand in Lent, but,
Mhm.
it's for me, it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that
Mhm.
applies to a lot of things. And it's something I know, you know, I saw, um, I saw my mom doing when I was growing up, and it really struck home for me as there would be, she'd be very accepting and forgiving of other people and then very strict on herself. And this way I was like, oh, that's how she does her thing. So that's sort of what I understand it to be.
Yeah, and this leads this also again. You're doing very well, Dorothy. Just segueing from one thing to the next. Yeah, I mean this leads into that next question that I had, which is about there's a lot of conversation around sacrifice in the play and like and grit and like for better or worse, right? That faith calls us to something. Um, and I'm wondering how you think about that. I mean, it's almost like sacramental in the way that these characters think about it is. But how do you hold that with like um, the sometimes intended and maybe sometimes unintended result uh, of that sort of misapplies this and it becomes oppressive, right? What are you how it sounds like what you're saying is that like the sacrifice is my choice to make, and
Yeah.
it's not something I'm going to apply to all people. uh
Totally.
how
And I'm not going to coerce it,
Yeah.
and I'm also going to fail. Like, I think for me, some of it is actually just real liturgical. And so it's
Mm,
like the things that you say every week are, you're like, God's great. I'm sorry.
mm, mhm.
And can we have some, like, here's some things we like. And building in a thing where you say you're sorry is an implicit admission that like you are going to screw up every single week.
Right.
And so I think it's having this dual sense that like on the one hand I am, I'm supposed to be treating my neighbor like myself. I'm, supposed to be feeding the hungry. I'm supposed to be, clothing the naked. I'm supposed to be doing all of these things. And also I will fail. I will not, be patient and kind with everyone that I love. I'm going to screw it up. Um, but I come and I say sorry. And then, hopefully I'm supposed to be a little bit better. But it's really strange. I mean, I feel like one of the craziest things about Christianity is the idea of grace. And it's inexplicable, it's unearned,
Mhm.
it's a weird gift, it just happens. And so I try to live my life, I try to sort of do the things I'm supposed to do, and then I also know that I am inside of a mystery and that things will happen that I am not in charge of. And I just kind of have to make it through. And I think if anything, I try to use it as a way to ratchet down, if I can, my own sort of judgment and really try to ratchet disdain. Like I just feel like
Mhm.
disdain and contempt are maybe like the least Christian values, you know?
Oh yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I can disagree with somebody, I can think they're a bad person, I can think they make bad choices, but to try to still see that like somewhere in there something divine somewhere and not to treat them as just unworthy of being here.
Yeah. Like image bearers, right? I mean,
Totally,
that is the core of the theology, right?
totally. So it's like I
And
can, yeah,
yeah, and like and it's tempting. I mean, it's very human. It's very human to like let that contempt rise, right? When we disagree or we see someone that some of it can be very like can be founded like we don't like the way you're treating someone else, right? It's like a sense of
completely.
justice or but uh
Completely. I mean, I wish I was, JD Vance's Eucharistic minister because I would love, very genuinely, like I would love to be like the body of Christ because I'm like, I want to believe that when you take this, you will have like a deep spiritual awakening about all of the harm that you caused and you will be plunged into like a period of repentance and cleansing and making it right. Because I do believe the thing works. Like I believe that the cracker is magic, right? I believe that it's all, deep and weird and works in strange ways. And so it's like the best thing I can imagine, if I had 5 seconds with him is I want to give you communion. Like
right.
this is what I want. I want you to have this moment of receiving this gift that is a gift, that you didn't deserve, that I don't deserve, neither of us deserve it. Um, and maybe allowing it to change you and believing that it possibly could.
We can pray for such things. um yeah. So what does this look like in real life, I guess? I think there's like the component of like what are your where does your faith hit the ground in organizing an action? And then I think, we had talked offline about like talking about our artistic practice too, and like how those things inform inform the work that we do. So I'm interested where you want to start there.
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is sort of to your point about community, like it's just showing up every week in a group of people who are real different from me,
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. And just being with them, and sort of sharing something together and, talking after mass and hanging out and having kind of a period of time to hang out. There's a lot of political organizing that happens at my church around the neighborhood that it is in. I don't live in that
Yeah.
neighborhood, but there are things that I can do. There's been a bunch of ICE raids, and so there's folks in the neighborhood who are scared to go to the grocery store. So, we sent money that people could buy groceries and bring them over to their houses so they could have groceries for the week. They're just like little things like that you're like, I'm not fixing everything, but I'm making sure that somebody gets, some bread and some milk and some eggs and like, things that they need for the week. I also think there's, you know, the social justice committee can definitely get, there's more intense things. There's phone banking around elections. There's, organizing petitions for signatures. Um, I also don't always agree with everything that people in my church, like there's political disagreement,
Mhm.
we maybe, sometimes vote the same way, but not always. People have different opinions.
Oh yeah.
And so that's just something to kind of live in the tension of. And I do feel like the, showing up, in places, whether it's a protest or a rally or an event or a prayer service, just kind of putting my body in the middle of the thing is another thing that I can do. And, the Archbishop of LA has been holding, he held like a mass for migrants and like these things that, the Catholic Church's relationship with the political right is very complicated and I can't summarize, but I feel like when there's a thing that feels like, oh, you're kind of, pushing back a little bit, showing up and saying like, hey, this is who our church is in this country right now. Like maybe
Hmm.
don't make everybody terrified,
Hmm.
or kick them all out. Um, so I think that's some of it. I also think, in terms of my work, it definitely informs a lot of the way that I try to tell the stories that I want to tell. I don't tend to write about religious people up to this point. I
Hmm.
have on some things, but mostly I don't. But I do think I always have a backstory in my head of every character and their relationship to religion.
Hmm.
So even if I'm writing a secular character, I'll be like, oh, this character grew up, going to a Reform synagogue, but then they didn't get a bar mitzvah. Like it's really important to me to
Hmm.
know how that impacts their view of the world.
Hmm.
So I will, even if I end up writing, a scene that has nothing to do with religion and it's just two people talking, I will have considered sort of their formation in childhood, their current practice, how I can't imagine creating a fictional character without sort of conceiving of some kind of religious or spiritual background, even if the answer is like, there was nothing,
Yeah. I
they
mean,
were,
that is like
they're
that is
nuns,
awesome.
their
You know?
parents are nuns, they read the Golden Compass, like
Yeah.
full stop, and that's also great. And I'm happy to write that character. But I feel like that's another choice I'll make. Um, and then I do think, it impacts because I was on a show that was very much about climate change, and I was definitely the person who was bringing in Pope Francis's Laudato Si. I was bringing in a lot of sort of religious climate material, um, and trying to push back against any kind of sort of, yeah, buddy, anything. Oh, mine's. Oh. Twinsies.
Twinsies.
Um, yeah, like I feel like I was there to push back on, I mean, weirdly from a perspective of life, of just being like, I don't want to talk about population control. I don't want to talk about, child bans, forced sterilization, like as climate solutions. Like I'm really not okay telling a story that the problem is we have too many people and a bunch of people should die and then the
Yeah.
planet will be okay. Like we actually have the ability to feed all the people on the planet and give them energy. It's, you know, some people have all this much of the pie and some people have this much of the
Mhm.
pie, but the problem isn't, that those people should all die. The problem is that the pie should get shared. So I feel like that was not a perspective that, everybody had. And so I do think, um, it's irrational in a good way. I think when you can get in a conversation, sometimes people can be very rational, and you're like, yeah, but your rational solution is actually horrible.
Mhm.
And it's valuable to me to have some, guiding truths that make me feel like, okay, yeah, maybe it's not rational, but I don't care. It's important.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, to just think about the fact that you going back to the point that you don't write a lot of religious people. I find myself like, uh, I am drawn to plays that have religion at the core. When I'm directing, it's just issues that I find deeply meaningful to people, and so then the stakes are so high,
Sure, of
which make
course.
it super dramatic, right? And I mean, it's also obviously like my own story, and feeling like I understand what wrestling with these ideas looks like and feels like and how it plays out in people's lives. So that's two different stances, I guess.
Yeah. I
Um,
just tried my first TV show about religion and nobody bought it.
no,
So back to the drawing board. Actually, no, it was my second. I tried to sell two TV shows about religion, and both of them were just huge flops. So
well,
I'll keep trying.
I don't I believe in it someday. I believe in it someday. Um, yeah, I think for me it's also about like the practice itself. So this is a lot of like what my master's work was essentially was like theater as spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And I think that functions in a variety of ways. And I sort of looked at it like with the traditional framing of like contemplation and action or faith and works. And I think from an audience perspective, from an audience perspective, a lot of times the work itself is like, or going to see a play is contemplative, right?
Sure.
It is that act of like meditating on goodness, beauty, and truth, and like pointing us towards something higher than ourselves, potentially, even in like even sometimes in a grotesque way, right? Uh, but for the artist, it is actually an active endeavor, right? And that I think that was the thing that I was like, that's the thing that I was really interested in exploring, and was like, how does the doing this work sort of align with Christian spirituality, and what
Yeah.
we're trying to do to like sort of identify with others, um and ultimately to like tell stories that point towards goodness. I mean, that's what we've been doing for millennia, right? And this gives us the forum. It's the contemporary forum to do it. So um, I think so. You and I have been talking for about 50 minutes now, so I do want to like open the floor up, and give some other people who've been patiently listening to us blabber, the opportunity to like ask you a question, or throw
Please.
a comment or whatever. So yeah, does anybody have anything that they want to ask Dorothy, or God forbid me? Don't be shy. Anyone? Bueller. That's okay if not. Um, what's we'll give a couple more minutes for people to think on it. I'm curious what's coming up for you, Dorothy. What's next on the agenda for you? I know you
Oh, that's
just
great. I feel like I'm so deep in like therapeutic culture that you're like, what's
oh
coming up
yeah.
for you? And I was like,
What's
oh, like
well,
what's coming up for me?
would
Like,
you like
what's
to would you like
no, 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 it's fine.
to talk about that?
It's just
Yeah.
a funny linguistic
Right. Yeah.
twofer. Yeah, I just finished like a year on a show on Apple that will be released I think in 2027, and I'm now at this time, which is like great and hard, that is just a part of sort of being a TV writer, which is I'm doing too many things because most of them won't happen. So
Hmm.
I'm, working on a million pitches, I'm taking a gazillion meetings, I'm sort of overcommitting. And if all of those things happened, it would be insane. But they won't. So I'm sort of trying to figure out, at some point, some chunk of them will, but I don't know which it is. There's also a play I think I'm going to end up writing. I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you know. That's sort of about, it's actually about like Calvinism and capitalism. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. But I'll,
Okay.
I'll call you if it
Okay,
ends up
great. Yeah.
happening. Um, and and yeah, and then just other, articles and other stuff like that stuff that I'm noodling on. So it's a fun time. It's a little bit unsteady. Like I have no idea, minute to minute what I'll be working on, but there's also a lot of stuff going around and it's exciting to be in the middle of it. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I also realized, I think for the first time in this conversation, that both of my daughter's godmothers, who are both like, amazing people,
Hmm.
one of them, they both have theology degrees. One of them like co-runs a homeless shelter, the other one is a hospital chaplain. But they both started as theater directors.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and I was just like, oh, right, to your point. Like, there is something deep about, the act of bringing a bunch of people together in a
Mhm.
space to do this kind of work.
That's helpful as I think about my career pivot.
You can easily either run a homeless shelter or be a hospital chaplain because I think for both of them, it's a lot of like, oh, it's a lot of incoming. And then you just have to be like,
Yeah,
yep, it's great. We got it. We're fine.
totally
Nope.
got it.
I'm so calm. I'm
Right.
so calm in the face of whatever you're giving me.
Yeah, who knew that there was such overlap? Um, so one more final call for any questions for Dorothy. If not, I have one closing question that I'm going to spring on her, which I didn't
Ooh,
prep her for, so that's always
exciting.
fun. Any other any questions or comments from the group? If I'm like somehow missing you in the chat and you just want to jump in, that's fine. All right. Everyone will hold their peace, but I'll ask Dorothy the final question, which is I don't think you'll have too much trouble with this, but I'm curious what are there any books or like either narrative or nonfiction that sort of like inspire your thought in this arena in some way?
Oh man, so many. I just read this book. I reviewed it actually. I wrote a book review of it, but it's called Circle of Hope. It's so good. It's sort of a reported story of this progressive church community, but it's like a progressive Anabaptist church community in Philadelphia in 2020. And it's
Hmm.
kind of a simultaneous story of like what 2020 was, and then this really like wrenching, tragic like process of this community trying to figure out how to live its values, and kind of come to terms with its failures, but also just that it's some of it's also just, the founding pastor, retiring, but then kind of not really retiring and trying to run things over his shoulder and like his son's
Mm,
there. And like there are ways in which it's a super ancient story about just like any pastor retiring. And then there are ways in
sure.
which it's like it's all happening on Zoom and, like
Oh,
everyone's, trying to, Zoom school their kids at the same time as they're doing these things. But I also would recommend to anybody who the main characters in the book, a lot of them grew up in a certain context, had sort of a rupture with the faith of their childhood, and then have reconstituted a faith in adult life. And
mm-hmm.
it's just a really beautiful telling of sort of their stories and how they're doing it, but then also these just gut-wrenching moments of like a missed connection.
Mhm.
Oh, and Susan Bigelow Reynolds' book. Let me get that because I'm going to get the title wrong.
While
Uh,
you're looking for that, I will say I posted a link in the chat for anybody who's interested.
if you
It
just want to
is
relive 2020, if you're like,
if
I
you want
didn't
to
get
really,
enough 2020, I
yeah, right.
really want more 2020 flashbacks.
I will say it's an Amazon link. You don't have to buy it from Amazon. We would love if you wanted to go and buy it from M. Judson Booksellers, our partner. I'm sure they would order it for you. Um,
And then this one's People Get Ready, and this is about a parish in Roxbury in Boston, and just about how their faith is also a form of solidarity, is also like a form of community building. And it's also just a reported story, but I think it's really beautiful. So
that's
one
great.
Catholic, one Protestant,
One
something for
Catholic, one
everybody.
Protestant. A Catholic and a Protestant walk into a bar, and
Exactly.
here we are.
Exactly.
Well, it is 8 o'clock. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time in the middle of the week. And I want to thank Dorothy again for joining us for this conversation. It's always enlightening to talk to you. And
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, of course, we're so grateful to like have you as a part of our community at the warehouse in whatever way we can. So thank you again for being here. One more shout out for if this conversation was fun and you want to have another one. Sunday after the matinee, the final performance of Heroes of the Fourth Turning, we'll be having a conversation about this book. Don't talk about politics. This one's an in-person conversation at the theater, so it'll start around 5:15 once the show ends. Um, you don't have to have read the book to be a part of the conversation. It certainly is nice if you want to read it and buy it from M. Judson and then have a conversation about it. But I also think it's enlightening just to come and, as we've said, build community around people that are interested in similar things. So thanks to everybody for coming out tonight, coming out. And we'll talk to you. We'll see you again soon. Spread the word. One more weekend of the show. If you haven't seen it yet,
All
we'd
right.
love for you to see it. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.